everyone, welcome to Move the Finish Line. I'm your host, April Nowlin, and if you're looking for a podcast that's authentic, unfiltered, that may make you laugh and might make you cry, you're in the right place. Get ready for an exciting ride with me and my guests as we share stories of resilience, restoration, and winning at life from everyday women. My goal is to encourage you to break through the barriers that are stopping you from chasing your purpose. All right, let's get ready to move the finish line. Of Move the Finish Line podcast. I'm very excited about my guest today. She is someone that I've known but not known, I feel like, for a very long time. So I met her through our church, and we crossed paths. We've had a few conversations, but she's someone that I have really watched just grow, live out her testimony, whether it's in person or on social media. And so I reached out to her and I was like, you know what? We need to hear your story. So my guest today is Raine Hardin, and she is an amazing, phenomenal woman. She is just on fire for Jesus. She's on fire for helping people to live out their best physical life through working out and fitness and eating right and all those good things that we sometimes hate to think about. But I feel like she does an amazing job at making it fun, making it purposeful. So welcome to the show, Raine.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, April, for having me. It is such a pleasure to be here. So I'm excited. Thank you so much.
Yes. So I want to dive right in. So you have a really big dream. And one of the things that I love is supporting people who have big dreams. I believe that God has given us big dreams for a reason. That reason, I believe, is to make an exceptional impact on the greatest amount of people while we're on this earth. And so I want to share with my audience the story of your big dream, and how sometimes dreams aren't always overnight, right? And they're not always immediate. And there's sometimes some things we have to go through in pursuit of that big dream. And so you had a dream, or you have a dream of supporting people in their physical health. So tell us a little bit about what that dream is.
Absolutely. So I have been a personal trainer now for about over 10 years. But one of the things that I noticed most while I was training people was that there were these moments where I really couldn't get them motivated if they have something going on with them. So I would take maybe 10, 15, sometimes 20 minutes, and I'm literally having like a therapy session with them prior to. And so over the years, one thing that I noticed was just that you cannot truly separate the body from the spirit or the heart or the mind. Like, your mental health is just as important as the body, as your spirit and your heart. So I've now came to a point where I really don't only want to help people physically, but I want to help with that connectivity. So allowing people to become strong internally and then allowing it to come to the surface. So my new project is more focused on that. But it's a big project. So I'm super excited about it. But yeah, that's the direction that we're going in now.
I love it. I love how you're combining those pieces together. So it's funny. So just this morning, I was reading a book by Dr. Cloud, which is like my favoriteest author in the whole widest world. And in the book, it's called 9 Things You Simply Must Do to Succeed in Love and Life. And he was talking about the story about this lady who was on a weight loss journey, and how she was constantly losing a lot of weight, then gaining it back, losing all the weight, then gaining it back. And she was seeing him again as a coach, and she's like, I'm ready to lose weight again. And he's like, but what's going to be different, right? Are you just focused on losing the weight, which is what she was focused on, but she wasn't focused on her holistic health, right? Meaning spiritual health, mental health, and how that played a part into her losing weight. So it's great that we're having this conversation today. And I just read about that this morning. So you started your business quite a few years ago, and then went on this interesting journey to get to where you are today. So share with us a little bit about how your business got started.
Okay, so again, initially I was a trainer, and I actually was grandfathered a gym, which is unheard of. But I had a mentor, and I ended up taking over his gym. And we were doing really well, actually. So it was awesome. I didn't necessarily know what I was doing, but I trusted God. And I just was like, God, I know this is from you, so I'm going to be all in. And so we ended up having to move the gym, for just overhead reasons. And when we did that, we probably weren't there more than a few months, and a semi truck ended up running into the side of the building where our studio was.
Wow.
And so, unfortunately, those events led to multiple events that actually ended up in me being homeless for a few months. So I was homeless for about 3 months, driving back from Phoenix to Tucson to get to my parents' house, sleeping in a rental car, sleeping at my friend's house. I had to go back to my old job, which is the worst. But it was one of those moments where, nothing that happened was my fault, but everything that happened was happening to me. Mm-hmm. And so I was forced to pick up all the pieces. And so it ended up being one of the best things that's ever happened to me. I mean, God used that moment to build me up, because when you lose everything, I mean, it was a ripple effect. I lost my business, which means I lost my income, and and I ended up losing everything in a very short amount of time. And so God used that to really just build me completely back up. And so I moved into a new place to live. And I remember moving in, and God so clearly said to me, I don't want you to get internet or cable. And I was like, okay, not thinking that was going to be a long-term thing, thinking, maybe a couple of weeks, a couple of months, maybe a year. And it ended up being 4 years. Wow. And in that 4 years, it was just me and God. Like, when everything was stripped away from me, I was in this place of isolation, but it wasn't a negative thing. It was a spiritual isolation where I had nothing but God. And because I also didn't have material things at the time, like, God literally was my everything. And so I had no distractions. I read more books than I've ever read in my life. You know what I mean? It was just, I was even in the moment, I was like, wow, God, I see what you're doing. This isn't one of those things where at the end of the 4 years, I was like, oh God, I see you working. No, I was like, it was so intentional. I had a fire inside of me, but ultimately the fire came because I had been stripped of everything. And during that 4 years, what I didn't know that I know now is that God was really building my character up, and he was pruning me in a way for now starting my new business now. So, I think what people may really want to take into account is that, in order to really be promoted and to be able to stand on the platform that God has for you, you have to be prepared internally. So it's, a lot of times we're focused on the location and the business logo and our clients and the profits. Well, what about your character? So if God does everything that God is telling you he's going to do, but you're not ready for it internally, you don't know how to have a peace of mind when things don't go right. You don't know how to talk to your team. You don't know how to be a leader. You don't, all of those things he really pruned in me in that 4 years. And it was hard, man. I mean, the Lord was not gentle. I mean, he's a gentle father, but he was really honest with me. Right. It was a very honest, hey, Raine, these are some concerns. These concerns are an issue, and we need to face them in order for you to move forward, and in order for me to be able to do what I need to do through you. So it was a transformative time. Lonely at sometimes, to be honest, but God was so intentional. And so man, what I learned during that moment, I honestly can say, is that you can surrender, but there also has to be a level of willingness, right? So God is the potter, but I'm the clay. But in order to really be clay, I have to be willing to be soft and moldable, and I have to be able to be teachable, and I have to be able to face things that don't sound good or look good. And so that's what I learned during that time, is that, there's a fearlessness that almost has to come, because guess what? It hurts to see some things in yourself that aren't pretty.
That is so good. Man, that's so good. I love how you touched on pruning. So in my book, I talk about the 3 purposes of pain, of which I felt like God gave me. I'm sure there's more, but the 3 he gave me, the first one, the purpose of pain is being pruned, right? There are things that God has to get out of us, like you said, to prepare us for those big dreams. And like you, in working with so many entrepreneurs, and the reason why I added life coach to my repertoire, just recently, is because same thing. I would see entrepreneurs that had these big dreams, and you've got the logo and you've got the website and you've got the product, but internally you are a mess. And I just don't believe that you can fulfill your purpose that way. And then the second thing is, I believe that it redirects our dependence on God. When we go through pain, like you said, it was like, God, it's just me and you. Like, I have to depend on you. I don't have anything else. And then lastly, I feel like the purpose of pain, or us going through pain, is to help someone else. And we'll talk about how you're doing that a little bit later. But in this season, in this 4 years, share with us some of the like just the emotional state that you were in. I've lost everything. I don't know what tomorrow looks like. What did that emotional season look like for you?
I think emotionally, it probably was harder at the beginning, because I think that's like the part of surrender, where the surrender came. Like, you have to accept where you are and be okay with it. I think we have to quit looking at other people's processes, other people's strategies, other people's, how they're doing it. Yes, we can learn from it. Yes, we can be inspired, but our path is our own, and God has ordered our steps individually. So at that point, I had to admit to myself, you just lost everything, and this really sucks. And even more so, I had to go back to my job that I had left, and that was embarrassing to some extent. And so for me, I think humbling myself and being vulnerable and being honest with myself. So I think emotionally, one of the main things I learned was like, man, keep it funky. If you can't be real with yourself when you're by yourself, then you're going to have a hard time in life. So that during that 4 years, I was like, look, Raine, like, it is what it is. Not necessarily that you have to tell everybody your business or tell everybody what you're going through, but at the very least, be honest with yourself. Be honest with yourself that you're not where you want to be. This happened to you. It's not ideal, but it happened, and you're going to be okay. You don't know when, you don't know how, but you do know who, and I knew that God was going to get me through it, but I also knew I had to be willing to allow him to do it. So for me, I think it was hard at the beginning, but then I was like, come on. I said, come on, God. Like, God has to be your friend. He's your friend. He's your father. He's all these things. And so I got to a point, I was like, what do you need from me? What do we got to do? Because I was like, I don't want to stay here. Yeah. So if any of this has to do with something I'm not doing right, or something I need to learn, or something I need to grow in, I was like, I know I can't necessarily expedite it, but I know I could not fight you in the process. So, I just got to a point where I was like, all right, Lord, you got me, man. What are we working on today? Literally, what are we working on this week? And I'm going to tell you this too. The beauty in that is that it did begin to expedite. When I look at those 4 years versus before, God would tell me to do something, it would take 6 months. It would take a year. And then when I got into the 4-year process, he's telling me something on Monday, and I'm doing it Monday. And now I'm overcoming things in a week, in a month, in 6 weeks. So what was taking me a long period of time to break chains, now it was becoming expedited, just because of the level of time, the level of presence, the level of willingness and surrender. It was just like, ain't no reason not to just, I'm in, I'm in, God. What do you need from me? So yeah, I think that's emotionally, that's definitely where I was at.
Man, that place of surrender. I think that is the turning point for most of us, right? When we get to that place to where it's like, okay, God, whatever you want. I feel like God is looking at us like, okay, you just gonna keep fighting it. You just gonna keep fighting it. You just gonna keep fighting it. And when you're ready, and that's the key. I think it's when you're ready to do it is when God says, okay, now I can step in. Because it makes no sense for me to step in and you not ready, right? So I love how you shared about getting to that place of surrender. The other thing that we don't talk about a lot is facing ourselves. Because during our healing process, during our healing journey, there are things that God shows us about us. And it's like, man, what? Are you serious? Is that really me?
Yeah.
And we have to face those things. And I think
Absolutely.
until we do that, God will not allow us to get to the next level. Because he's like, why should I allow you to get to a place where your character is not going to keep you, right? Where you're going to hurt people. I'm not going to put you in a position to hurt people. Like, I need you to wait and clean this stuff up so that you can get to the next level. So at this point, you've gone through these 4 years. What was a kind of turning moment where you said, all right, like, I feel like I've learned some things, I've healed from some things. What was that moment that you felt like it's time to get back out there and start chasing this dream again?
Well, I think initially I was like, oh Lord, I can't go through this again. It hurt so bad and I was so disappointed in myself and embarrassed, to be honest. But I think over the 4 years, like on the inside, like my spirit knew that I was meant to be an entrepreneur. Like, you just know, I gravitate towards entrepreneur. My parents have been entrepreneurs for 40 years. So I grew up in a household where that was a part of our life. And I'm just always just everything, 90% of the people that I follow on Instagram are entrepreneurs, without me even knowing. I gravitate towards people who love what they're doing and they're creative and they fight for the things that are on the inside of them. But the moment, I would probably say we had quiet time with God, and in 2018, and so that's in January, and God started just waking me up like 4 o'clock, 2 o'clock, and was like, write this down. So I started writing stuff down. And sometimes it was pictures, sometimes it was words, and it looked like a business. Now, the thing about it that was interesting is that it didn't look like the business that I would have created. It had pieces, it didn't make sense. It had pieces that I'm like, I'm not qualified for that. It had pieces that I'm like, I don't have intellectually, I don't know anything about this. I could do some research. I could go back to school. So when I started looking at it, I'm like, God, this is big. 1, it was way bigger than me. 2, it looked completely complex. And 3, it didn't really make sense what I felt I was supposed to be doing, but it had bits and pieces of me kind of sprinkled in. So I think that was like the first part. I was like, okay, God, you want me to do something, but you're not giving me enough information to know exactly what it is. So I knew that it still was the sowing season. So, he was showing me things, but I'm like, you're showing me it. I believe now that he was showing me it so that I could have hope. And that allowed me to dream again. That allowed me to have enough courage to not think small. And then I started coming up with business ideas. So I started, writing out business plans. The initial business plan that I wrote out is really nothing like what we're doing now, but I wrote it out in faith, and then God just began to give me more details and gave me more specific things of what he wanted me to do. So that was definitely 2018. So that was definitely the moment I was like, all right, God, I see you. You got something up your sleeve for me. So
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. It's funny how I think of it the way God gives us things like puzzle pieces, right? Like, he can see the whole puzzle and he's given us piece by piece. And as we start to put the pieces together, I love how you said it gave you hope. Because you start to see like, okay, Lord, I'm starting to see this puzzle come together and it's working. I don't see the whole picture yet, but you've given me just enough to keep putting those pieces together. And so in putting those pieces together, one of the things that, I am just a advocate for is getting help with the puzzle that we need to put together. And whether that is professional help, such as therapy or school or education, but also personal help. So whether that's friends, families, people that we talk to. So as God is now giving you these puzzle pieces and you're like, all right, I got hope, I'm getting ready to step out on this thing. What help did you enlist in your life to help you move forward, to keep you going?
I would probably say it was 3 different layers to that. One, I started serving a lot at church. I didn't have all the things that I wanted or needed. And I just felt like, I remember telling God, like, you could have all of me. And that wasn't just intellectually or, my heart. It was like, you could have my time. And so God was like, well, I want you to, I was already serving at this time, but I remember going to the minister at the time and I said, you could literally, whatever you need, you could have. Whatever time you need, you could have. During the week, weekends, night, you could have it. And so serving for me kind of took my mind off of myself. And I think in loving other people and serving other people, that it is so almost the opposite, right? Instead of me asking for help, helping others, then in turn it was like a healing process for me. And it helped me build up my gifts, and it helped me understand even more clearly what God wanted for me. So that's probably number 1. Number 2, I had to learn how to be vulnerable. It's not that I have a hard time asking for help. I almost feel like it's a burden to ask for help. So for me, God showed me that I struggle with vulnerability. And so in doing that, God asked me then to lead a small group at church for women. So again, more serving. I was like, Lord, can I serve any more than I do? And he said, yes, Raine, you can. So I started serving as a leader for a small group. And in that, you really can't lead an intimate group like that without becoming very vulnerable. Yeah. So I went from a person who didn't want to tell people anything, really, to crying, and giving my testimony and telling my story with women who I did not know and inviting them into my home. So that was phase 2. And then the last thing was when I started the business, legally, LLC, all this stuff, God told me specifically who to reach out to. And I think that is, you're like, okay, Lord, but did you tell them that they were supposed to be a part of this project? Did you tell them they're supposed to be my partner? And, right. And that part is crazy, because the answer to that is he may not tell them specifically, but he does tell them, they knew. It's like they knew I was coming. They knew I had something, and they knew that they were going to be a part of it. So that last part, yeah, man, like God, this last probably year, I've never stepped out on the water so much in my life. Just, meeting with people. And the crazy thing is that, God knows about gifts that people have that we as humans may not be able to see on the surface. So he was telling me to reach out to certain people, and in the natural, I understood why. But when I sat down with them, I was blown away by gifts I didn't know, by things and talents that they had that I didn't know about, by connections that they had that I didn't know about. And I was like, wow, God. And all I had to do was just tell them that I think they're supposed to be a part of my project. Literally, like, I think God, I think you're on my list of people. This is what God showed me. Do you want to be a part of it? And when I tell you the last, 6 months to a year, God has brought me the most tremendous, amazing, willing, just people who just not only believe in the project, but believe in me. And not only that, like, just seeds that I sowed 10 years ago, 15 years ago, people like, whatever you need, Raine, I got you, and so that is number 3, has been, just being okay with saying, hey, Do you want to be a part of this? Do you think you can help me? Do you have, I even contacted you, April,
Yep.
about some stuff. I'm like, hey girl, but it's not easy. You would think that it would be easy. Maybe it is easier for other people, but it hasn't been easy for me. Vulnerability is one of the biggest things I struggle with. So, asking people for help and admitting that I don't know what I'm doing in every area of my business is hard. But God has been so grateful towards me, and just has extended me such grace, man, and given me such humility as well. So
Wow. I love how you tied giving back in response to getting what you needed. I think we forget about that, right? Is when we serve others, that is giving God an opportunity for us to get the help that we need. And we don't even know it. Stepping out to lead a small group, I led my first small group last year, and it was such a blessing to me. I went into it thinking, okay, God, I feel like I've got something to give back, but I got so much more out of it than what I ever thought. And even thinking about you reaching out to people for help when I started this podcast. So even as an entrepreneur, I never thought about having a podcast. Like, it was just the furthest thing. Like, this doesn't even make sense for me. And last October, October of 2020, God was like, you need to do a podcast. You need to share these stories. And I'm like, who am I going to ask? Like, I'm a nobody. I mean, I have like friends and stuff, but I'm a nobody. Who am I going to ask? And literally every woman that I have asked to be part of this podcast, just like when I asked you, it was almost like no questions asked. What do you need? I'm here. And I was like, what? Like, how is this happening? And so, I believe that when it is your time to do something, God has provision, and that provision doesn't always look the way we think it's going to look. It doesn't always come the way we think it's going to come. That provision may be, just like you said, through people's gifts and talents and skills. It may not always be money or tangible, but there's a reason why God has those people connected with you, because they have something that you need. And even if it's people that you never would have thought of, right? It's the least obvious people that I feel like God puts in your path to help you get to the next step. So you're at this point to where you're now, hooking up with people. God has given you the blueprint. You're walking it out. One of the things that I always like to focus on is doing the work, right? So we get instruction, we get plans, we get ideas, but at the end of the day, we have to do the work to walk it out. And so now at this stage in your business, what are you doing? What does doing the work look like for you?
Man, doing the work is really work. I would probably say doing the work right now is, I have the vision, I have the people, praying on the money coming. The money is on its way, it's in the atmosphere. But tangibly, I don't have everything that God has shown me yet. So doing the work for me is like keeping the hope alive, keeping my faith elevated, keeping my eye on the prize, right? And so for me, it's getting up every day and doing something that's necessary, doing something that's relevant, whether it's me studying, whether it's me reaching out to someone, whether it's me looking at a piece of the puzzle that maybe has been neglected, owning a business and bringing people in, that's a lot of pressure, to be honest with you. So for me, I'm gonna be honest, I think at the beginning, when a lot of people started getting involved, or more people started getting involved, I started feeling the weight. Like, I want to be successful, and now me being successful, or us being successful, is going to affect other people. These people have families. These people need money as well. So, and when I started feeling that weight on my shoulders, I realized I have to be closer to God now than I've ever been. So I think the work initially was like very tangible, very in the natural, to-do list, which you got to do the to-do list. But if I skip my time with God, or if I'm not focused on my health, which that's my business, right? If I'm not focused on my mental health, I'm not focused on my physical health, if I'm not eating properly, then I can't even get to the list, right? So for me, I'm like, man, like I think especially being in the leader position, I feel like being the founder and the president of my company, God has got to be my right hand, my left hand, my front, my back, and I have to be with him every moment. And so for me, it's just been like, I've had moments in the last week or so where I'm like, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do my to-do list. I'm going to just spend time with God, because I just feel like, one, that's how I got here. For 4 years of nothing but God,
Right.
So for me, and I think God has shown that to me. A couple of things that God said to me was, at the beginning of 2021, he said, push, but don't rush. He also said to me, less is more. And I think we've all learned that with the pandemic, right? That, their quality over quantity is not just a saying, it's real. It is better for me to do 2 things in a day that are going to push me forward and that are attached to my purpose, and to do 10 things that just make me feel good because I was busy, And so I've learned that, over the last 10 years, just minimalizing busyness and trying to feel important. No, what is God calling me to do today? And sometimes, even when you have a project that is big and is in motion, sometimes God is calling me to be still and just to be with him. And I just thank God. And there's no way that I would have known that if I didn't have those 4 years of isolation. There's no way. There's no way that I would be able to tap into that and say, you know what, God, the work that you want me to do on this Monday is this podcast with April, or this work I want you to do today is I want you to write and meditate and just be in your presence. Because he knows that time with him is necessary to be able to even do the work.
Yes.
I mean, the work is exhausting. The work is fun if it's your purpose, but I'm gonna be, just be honest, and I'm sure you feel this as well as an entrepreneur. I stay up at night. I mean, my mind is like, I can't sleep.
Yes.
It's a positive can't sleep, but I'm just, what more can I do? Did I do everything I need to do? And so I just think you got to be, for me, I've learned that spiritual work and slowing down and being still, that work might almost be more important than with the work that I have to do when I get going and I'm in hustle mode. But yeah.
That's so good. That is so good. Doing the work looks different for everybody, right? My work isn't the same as your work, but one thing that I believe we all have in common, part of doing that work is taking time to listen and hear from God on what's next. The fact that you said, you can do 2 things in a day that have more impact than 10 things just because I checked them off my list or just because I got them done. And specifically, if you're doing those 2 things that God told you to do, they're going to have a greater impact than the 10 things that you just need to do because you need to be busy or you need to get things done. So Raine, I have thoroughly enjoyed talking to you again today and sharing your testimony, sharing your wisdom, girl, sharing just what you've learned. And so if there's someone listening to this podcast and they may be where you were 4 or 6 years ago, and it's like, look, I feel like my dream just got crushed, no matter what that looks like, what advice would you give them in that season?
I'm going to give you advice and I'm going to plug my business. So I actually named my business after my process. So my business is called Make Room Phoenix. So my advice would be is make room for the process, make room for God, make room for your growth, make room to heal, make room to be whole. Because had I not allowed myself to go through the process of wholeness, I wouldn't even be here. There's no way. The wholeness changed everything about me. It allowed me to see my worth. It allowed me to see my gifts. It allowed me to see other people and allowed me to see God and what he really wanted me to do. So what I would encourage you to do is just make room and just also know that every season has an intention. And there are going to be seasons that seem empty. There are going to be seasons that have a drought. There's going to be seasons that feel so dry, but I guarantee you that God is with you. He is there. There is nothing he does is without purpose. And then there's going to be a season that is fruitful. You know what I mean? And so every season is just as important. Do not rush a season. Do not rush it, because listen, if you rush it, you will go through it again, and you'll go through it again, and you go through it again. So, make room for God, and make room for what he's trying to do in you.
Thank you. That is awesome. Make room. I love it. I'm going to have to revisit that for myself and just ask myself, even in the season that I'm in now, where things are seemingly going well, right? Like, am I making the room I need to make to go to the next level? So, Raine, thank you so much for joining me for today's podcast. I am so grateful to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. It was such a blessing. You're so awesome. So this was awesome. I'm so proud of you for doing this. This is great today. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, guys. So that is another episode. I hope and pray that you guys got something from listening to Raine. I just believe that it was purpose for her to be on the podcast, just like any of my other guests. And my prayer is that by listening to her today, it will encourage you to move the finish line. All right, y'all. Now, I hope you enjoyed this episode. I pray that it encourages you and you were able to laugh a little bit along the way. Now, if you know someone who has a story of resilience, restoration, and winning at life, let me know. I would love to share their story with my audience. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you guys don't miss a beat. If you want to connect with me, hop over to aprilnowlin.com, where you can learn all about how I help women to cultivate their purpose so they can impact more people. You can connect with me on Facebook and Instagram and Clubhouse under April Nowlin. Thanks again for listening.